right. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Gorowski, and I'll be your host for today. May is it's just not stopping. It is moving along. I can't believe how quickly it's going. Some of our friends' classrooms in the United States are wrapping up their school year. Others are going further into June, and many of the Canadian classrooms will go right till the end of June. But that school year is disappearing really quickly. But we still have lots more live events, connections with scientists, with explorers, adventurers, and conservationists around the world for your classroom. So you can check out the rest of our May lineup at exploringbytheseat.com. And then we've just announced a huge Ocean Week lineup of events. We're teaming up with groups like the Explorers Club to really showcase ocean scientists and researchers and conservationists from around the world. So you don't want to miss that week. We're going to have live trips to the field, to ocean ships. We're going to be at aquariums. We're going to have all kinds of great speakers joining us. So do check that out, exploringbytheseat.com, and it's under the special events section. All right. Well, you saw that intro today. That intro was for one of our live field events. So we are going to join in the field Dr. Bob Gregory and his team as they are out on the beach. They're catching, identifying, counting, and measuring juvenile fish in their nursery habitat in Newman Sound, Newfoundland, so in Canada. Bob is a research scientist in the Environmental Sciences Division of Fisheries and Oceans Canada in St. John's, Newfoundland, and an adjunct professor at Memorial University of Newfoundland. So he's conducted research on fish nursery habitats for over 40 years. So when the Q&A time comes, I have a feeling he's going to know a thing or two about juvenile fish. So let's bring Bob in live with us right now. Hey, Dr. Bob, how you doing?
Very good.
All right. I'm going to make you full screen here because we want to see where you are. Okay. We've got a great group of classrooms hanging out with us, Bob, and I can see the net. I see your team on the boat. This looks so cool.
Yeah. I'm going to introduce them now. First, our videographer is Ashlyn Mercero, which you can, use your hand now.
Got my hand.
And on the boat, we've got Cody Fitzpatrick driving, and Courtney King deploys the net. So our net is out in the ocean now, and then we'll just deploy the full width of it, and you'll see it being deployed. Basically, this program that we're on now basically started 27 years ago. What we're out in May doing is we're finding out, because it's actually early spring here, we're finding out what the overwinter survival of juvenile fish was over the last year and over the last winter. Winter in Newfoundland, especially in the water, can be 6 months long. So how fish do from the fall through to the winter as little ones is very important to how they recruit to the fishery, how many babies are able to grow up into juveniles and then subsequently adults. So our main species of interest is Atlantic cod. These start out as fish about this big, and then they grow and they become this big if they go to full age, and they can sometimes weigh as much as 50 kilograms by the time they're finished growing. But we see them as extremely small fish in here, and they're in here because eelgrass is here. They hide in eelgrass, they hide in kelp and rockweed and things like that, little, like algae and plants. We can do a swing down to here. You can see the eelgrass on the shore from the winter. This is settled out. This was alive last year in the fall. Basically what happens is it decays over the winter and provides nutrients to the environment. And these nutrients support all the phytoplankton, zooplankton, and other things that fish actually eat. So that's basically why this plant is important. It decays and produces food for fish, and it also, when it's upright in the water column, it actually provides cover for fish. So the juvenile fish hide in it, and they hide from bigger fish. So what we're sampling this Yeah, what we're sampling today is the overwinter survival of these fish. We sampled these same fish last fall when they were a little smaller. But basically, over a 6-month period of the winter, they don't grow very much at all. So basically, they're basically barely making it to the spring, and then they depending on how long and how harsh the winter was, they will do better. So basically, we are literally exploring by the seat of your pants, because we actually don't know how many fish we're going to get, and therefore what the survival is of these juvenile fish. So our main species is juvenile Atlantic cod. We also get winter flounder and lumpfish, which is a really interesting species. If we get one of those, you'll find that fascinating. But we also get some elements of their food supply as well. So we'll see what we've got going. So we've been here, as I said, for this is our 27th field season doing this. And basically we sample 12 sites per trip, and we do that 12 times a year. This is the first trip of this year. So what you can see is Cody and Courtney bringing in the net now, and they're basically, you hear them calling out where they are along the line of the seine as it's coming in, and they're doing that in order to keep it even as they're coming in, and basically that allows the net to come in nice and smoothly, so the fish that we're trying to capture, count, and measure are actually being retained in the net. So we will deal with that shortly. The whole net samples 880 square meters of seabed. This is it's called a demersal net. It sinks. Basically, this net tows along the bottom, just bumping along above the bottom, and only actually comes to the surface right at the end. So they will process that now, and we will have a look and see what we're getting. Sorry about that. So now you can see what the net is like. The first thing you'll notice on the net is that it's very small. The mesh on the net is extremely small. It's only for juvenile fish. It won't catch adults. The adults see this net coming through the water and they just swim around it. But we do get a lot of juveniles, and typically, and they will still be in the water at this point towards the seaward end of the net. So we'll just let them do what they do best, and they'll haul the net in. I'll give them a hand every once in a while. Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to help them haul in the net now. Okay, we do have some fish. Okay.
So what Courtney's pulling away right now is known as the cod end, and it's just to make sure that the net doesn't get tangled. She's taking it all the way out and away.
Yeah. So basically that was a very good haul, perfectly fine. And basically what we're doing now is we're getting the catch ready to count. We will go over and we will see what they've been doing. So basically what we're trying to do is we will be counting the fish, identifying them, counting them, and measuring them. So the measurements of the fish basically tell us, matched against how big they were in the fall, how fast they've grown, and whether they've actually become, whether they're actually turning over to be exhibiting springtime growth. Okay, so let's go see what they're doing. Now this guy is a sculpin. He's a long, short-horned sculpin. It is a threatened species. So we're enumerating these as well. He is also a predator of some of the smaller fish that we're looking for. So Courtney and Cody are measuring these fish now, and basically this one's a winter flounder. He's also he's a juvenile. He's a big juvenile. These fish can go as long as the measuring board when they're full grown, and they spawn and live here. They're basically they're called winter flounder in off the coast of New England, because basically that's the time you see them. They come in and they spawn. Here in Newfoundland, it's cold enough that the winter flounder actually come on into shore in the summer. So sometimes common names can be a bit confusing. Now here we do have a smaller sculpin. He is probably about 2 to 3 years old at that size. These fish grow very slowly, maybe 2 or 3 centimeters a year. We do have cod, yeah. Okay. And this is a cod. And believe it or not, that cod is 1 year old. So that cod was settled out of the plankton last year, maybe in as late as November, and again, 6 months later, they're still growing, and basically they come into the winter and they don't grow much for that 6 month period from then till now. So he's only really starting to put on a growth spurt, if you will, now. So let's see what else we've got. Okay, yeah. This one is, he's an adult. This one is called a rock gunnel, very eel-like, and basically, and he doesn't like being on the board very long. But we get those regularly. They become more common recently, and we think this is because of our waters are warming up a bit, which for Newfoundland that's a good thing. Okay, so yeah, yeah, and a couple more. Anything? Yeah. Okay. Now, that one is, this was a baby winter flounder. He was spawned last year. He only hatched last year. So this one is, we got, he's 3.5 centimeters long. Very short, inch and a half for those of you using that system. Yeah, the other thing that we have of interest in here is we have the food supply of some of these fish. So that if we can bring up one of these on the net. This is, let's see. These are mysid shrimp, and there's a few more of them. These are mysid shrimp. These are food for the fish that we just, we're measuring now, the juvenile fish that we're measuring now. We can put them back in the water now. Basically, these individuals grow very fast. The reason why they're in the near shore waters that we're in now, the extreme shallow coastal zone waters that we're sampling, is that these waters in the spring warm up faster than anywhere else along the coast. And that brings the fish from a little deeper out where they were overwintering under ice and things like that. And it brings them into the shore because they're trying to feed when the food that they have are active in the warmer water. Okay, so that's basically why they're here now, and that's why these juveniles are there as well. Okay, another gunnel. Yeah, but they're very interesting fish. They hide among the rocks and the eelgrass. We've seen them in eelgrass as well. So this is a perfect home for them. This is a nice eelgrass bed that you can't really see because it's under the water. But basically, this one little cove has got a lot of eelgrass in it, and very important for their overwinter and spring survival. Okay. And do you have any other?
I think that's all the species.
That's all the species. Okay, that's actually a pretty good haul for what we get. There are not many cod in this particular haul, but there are a couple. There don't have to be a lot. There have to be some, and so this is actually very good. And the other species are well represented here. So what we'll do now, since we're almost finished with this haul, and we would do this procedure. We would do this procedure a couple of maybe 6 or 7 times a day, and basically do these counts and measurements on the fish that we get. So we'll use these data then to calculate overwinter survival of several of these species, and go from there. I think we can release that. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Good.
Yep.
Yeah. So this is basically what we do, and after that, what we end up doing is we end up taking the data from what we just did. We take it back to the lab, do all kinds of mathematical modeling on it and that sort of thing to calculate growth, mortality, how fast they die, and that sort of thing, in order to assess how healthy the stocks of fish, the populations of fish are from year to year. And as I said, we've been here doing this sort of work for 27 years. Or this is our 27th year, which makes it among cod nursery area studies. It's the most studied cod nursery area in the world. There is one other one in Norway that's also been active even longer than ours. But we're here. We're here from July from July to December, and then adding on this spring trip that's always very important for us. But the baby cod, the ones that are even smaller than the ones we were looking at in the tubs here, those show up in July and August, and they show up as small as 30 millimeters, so a little bit smaller than these ones. And sometimes they will grow to about this big, and then they become 1-year-olds over the course of the winter. So I think we're pretty good at this point. I think we can probably start I could talk about you can ask me the questions, and I'll see if I can answer them for you.
All right, that sounds great. Well, Bob, so many things to say. That was really great to see that, the whole procedure from start to finish. It looked like you had a great haul there with some really cool species. And it looks like your office is pretty beautiful.
Yeah, it is a great office. It's one of the best things of the type of work I do, and it's why I keep. It almost refreshes me to keep at it.
All right. Well, let's get into a little Q&A action. So those who are tuning in via YouTube, it's now the time. If you have any questions, pop them into the chat. Of course, let us know where you're tuning in from, and we'll work some of those questions in. But for now, let's head over to some of our live camera classrooms, and let's see what kind of questions they have for us today. So here we go. We are going to start off. There's my list. Okay, we're going to go to Miss Cottrell's crew. Some 5th graders hanging out with us today. I'm going to bring them into the call right now. Here they come. Hey, 5th graders, how we doing? All right, great to see you. Who's got a question?
So we're studying about, like, in our class, we're studying about, like, the quality of, like, fresh water. So in our class, we're studying about, like, the quality of fresh water. So we were just kind of wondering if you were fishing in salt water or fresh water.
This is all salt water here.
I can see some of the students pumping their hands. Yes, so I think some of them were guessing it was salt water. Some of them maybe thought it was fresh water.
I actually should have mentioned that. Yes, this is all marine water behind us. This is all salt water. Although there are some freshwater streams coming into this body of water here, and it's actually very important. These sites are very important because of the fresh water. They bring different types of nutrients into the marine environment, and you tend to find eelgrass, which you guys are using as nursery habitat. The eelgrass tends to like a little bit of fresh water coming in the marine environment, so they and it brings a little bit of sediment in. Eelgrass is it's almost like a terrestrial plant. It's almost like grass in your yard. Basically, it has roots. It's not an algae, which basically attaches to a rock or something like that. Eelgrass has roots, and it takes its nutrients it needs to grow from the root from its roots, and that comes in through fresh water into the sediment and that sort of thing here. So it is a marine habitat, but it has freshwater influence.
All right, very cool. Well, Mrs. Cottrell's group, I know that you have lunch in a few minutes, so I want to see if you have a second question. We can get it in now with your crew. And nice and loud for us.
I was wondering, what is the largest fish you have seen?
Okay, so Bob's just wondering the largest fish you've caught.
The largest fish we caught was yesterday. In 26 years, the largest fish we ever caught was yesterday.
Wow.
That was a brook trout that was about this big. And that fish is not a juvenile. That's a fairly big trout, a fairly big trout for our environment. But it's basically called a sea run brook trout, which means it's one that has gone from freshwater to saltwater, grown up over a couple of years, and then come back. And that fish will spawn and produce babies this year. And that's why that fish is here. We caught that yesterday, so we were very careful with that one. That was quite interesting to see that.
All right. Well, we're going to start bringing in another camera classroom in a moment, but I want to grab a question here from YouTube about, you mentioned that some of the species that you're catching are threatened. Is it hard to get permission to be able to take these samples?
What we have to be very careful with is we try very hard not to hurt them. So what we find in some of these species that are threatened, or some of them that can be endangered and that sort of thing, we are authorized at Fisheries and Oceans Canada to take those fish, but we don't sample them. We just measure them and release them. So the fish that you saw here are all now back in their home environment. They were all measured and then they were released. That's very important for our program, as we do as little damage to the environment and to the fish that we're measuring and counting and identifying as possible. But that's a very good question. But another species that we will catch, we didn't see any here, but a lot of the one fish that we are working on currently is called a white hake, and that's a relative of Atlantic cod, but it's one that that is also threatened, and it turns out that this area is a very good nursery area for white hake as well. Now, white hake, we don't know where the adults go at all. We see the juveniles that weren't here now, but we see the small juveniles come in July, and as young of the year. These are individuals that would have been spawned that year, and then they basically disappear in the fall, and we don't know where they go. So there's still a lot to learn about some of these species. We just don't know all the answers about them.
All right. Well, I'm going to bring in a grade 4-5 class, hanging out with Mr. Hancock. I'm going to bring them in now. Hey, 4-5s, how we doing?
How's everybody doing? Good. We're getting close to lunch here as well, but we had a question for Bob. We were wondering, many of our students were wondering where the passion and the interest started out. How did you get into this line of work?
Yeah, that's a good one. I've basically always been interested in science, and basically, so people have asked me that before, and actually, I knew I wanted to be a scientist when I was in grade 1. It's just not normal. Most people learn about these things and become interested later. And I knew I wanted to be a scientist very early on. I didn't know I was going to study fish until I went to university. I've always had a love of science. I've always been exploring things. I was doing my first experiments when I was in high school, before anybody told me how to do experiments. So it's a very good question. You develop a passion for this sort of work. This is I like to tell people this is the best job anybody could ever have, because I like what I'm doing. I like to get out in the wild, into the wild environment a lot, and it's just an interesting thing for me.
All right, and Mr. Hancock's crew, do you want to squeeze in one more? Do you have another one?
Oh, sure, definitely, Joe. That'd be amazing. Thank you for asking if there's anything strange or unusual you ever pulled in on the net. It seemed like everything you brought in was just from the natural environment.
We have, every once in a while, we will pull in on these seine nets. We will pull in a fish that shouldn't really be here. One of the ones that we know we've pulled in that are normally in the offshore, like you're talking about 200 kilometers or so away from shore. We pulled in a larval, small baby witch flounder one time, and a witch flounder is completely clear, and it came in and it was this big, and that was a really small baby fish, but it was flat and swam on its side all the way through the water, but basically it was clear. You almost didn't even see it. Another one that's really interesting is that I like is called a sea raven, and it's a little bit of a distant relative to the sculpin we were seeing earlier, but basically it's all spines and it's an ambush predator. It's one of these fish that sort of lies in the bottom and waits for something to swim over it, and then it grabs it. There's a lot of fish like that in our environments. But sea ravens, the sea raven was about this big, and it's red. So you think it couldn't hide at all, but actually when it gets in the water and goes down probably about 10 meters deep or so, so way over our head, but basically it gets about there and it disappears because the red light is absorbed by the seawater. So it blends right into the background, disappears.
Very, very cool. And great questions from Mr. Hancock's class. Thank you very much. Let's see, where should we go now? We have some more fifth graders hanging out with us with Mr. England. And I think they even have a special chair right up front. So I'm going to bring them into the call.
Right in the front row.
All right. Hey, fifth graders, how we doing?
How we doing? Doing well. Thanks for calling.
All right. Who's on deck? Who's got a question for
Brad,
us?
you're up, buddy.
Do you look at the different genders of fish? And if you do, how do you tell the difference?
I didn't.
Genders of fish.
That is sometimes yes, most times no. Some of the fish that you catch, you can see very clearly that there are the males have a different color, or they're a different size. Good example of that, we didn't get one here today. I was actually hoping we would. Is called a lumpfish. And lumpfish is actually, it's a very good name for the fish because it looks like a lump. And it's basically about this big. And the red ones are males. And they actually guard the nest. The females are very much bigger. They're about this big, probably about 4.5 to 5 kilograms in size. And they lay their eggs in a couple of batches. They do it at this time of year, and they are gray. They basically hide. Whereas the males are basically colored the way they are to intimidate the other males into staying away from the nest that they're now guarding. And those lumpfish babies from the eggs will hatch in about a month and a half. And they guard them that long. So that's one example. Sticklebacks are another fish that live in the near shore, and they are actually, the males are blue and red. And they're smaller again than the females, and the females are silvery. And they're so they're quite distinct. The Atlantic cod that we were looking at before, you can't tell the difference. You can only tell the difference from them is when they're spawning, and then you see eggs or milt that are produced by the males. But basically, that's sculpins are another interesting one. That basically they have little red blotches on their belly when the males are in mating mode. And that is in the fall of the year. So sometimes you can see which ones are which. But a lot of the time you can't.
Okay. Mr. England's crew, do you want to follow up with another question?
We have one more, yeah.
Perfect.
Listen.
My name is Leslie. My name is Leslie, and I'm from St. Joe. And my question is, do you know why fish prefer water temperatures?
Do you know why fish prefer certain water temperatures?
That is because that's internal to the fish. That's what we call physiological adaptation. Some fish like cold water. Some fish like warm water. We know they do. Why they do is a different issue, and one I can't really tell you much about. But yes, there are fish that really do like certain temperatures more than others. The ones here, the cod, for example, their favorite temperature is 12 degrees Celsius. And if it gets much warmer than that, they really don't like it at all. And they will try to go to deeper water to get to cold water and cool down, and they will stay there. Now, there is a danger in doing that. The problem is their predators are in deep water too. So if it warms up a lot here, then those fish are subjected to predators that are actually in the deeper water. What makes the fish here a little safer is they're in shallow water where the big fish tend not to want to come into. Other fish, like tropical fish, for example, they like warmer waters, and they're adapted to oxygen and temperature tolerances that are physiological in nature. They basically it's very unique to the species of which animals like the warm and which ones like the cold. One of the interesting things we have in Newman Sound is we have cunner, which are actually a type of race. And cunners are cold adapted tropical fish, and we have them here. But what they do is, because they actually like warm water, they are in shallow. They like warm water. They're in shallow. The temperature it warms up, and that's when we see them. Right now, it's too cold. They don't like this. This water is about 4 degrees, and they are basically hiding in the rocks right now, asleep. And they will come out. They will come out of the. They will come out of the rocks within another month or so, and they will actually be growing for about 2 months, and then they go to sleep again. So, but they're a tropical species that's a little farther north than you would expect them to be. Very good question. I hope I answered your question as I did it as well as I could, but this is one we just it's beyond what I know.
All right, fair enough. We have another classroom, some 6th graders, and they're actually in Newfoundland, which is pretty cool. Miss Wells' crew is hanging out with us. I'm going to bring them front and center. Hey, 6th graders, how we doing?
Hi.
Hello.
All right, who's on deck? Who's got a question for us?
Hi, I got a question. How long does it take for codfish to fully grow?
How long does it take for codfish to fully grow?
Okay, that's a good one. I thought I heard that right, and yes, I did. How long does it take codfish to fully grow? They never stop. That's the simple answer, and that's the answer for most fish. Cod, the oldest cod that I know of that's been caught, was 30 years old and weighed 50 kilograms and was about this big. And it was caught in the Magdalen Islands or near the Magdalen Islands of the Gulf of St. Lawrence. And they know how old that fish was. It was over 30 years old. And they know that because of they measured the rings on the scales. And they could count the rings. We do that a little bit here, or something similar. But that's the oldest one and the biggest one I've ever heard of.
All right, and we'll bring our class from Newfoundland in for another question. I think I saw someone pop up. There we
go. Have you seen any growth in the cod stocks over the years?
This is in the number of cod in the ocean?
Yes.
We have seen a recovery in cod, just for the whole background of everybody. Cod fishery here, as far as a fishery is concerned, collapsed in the early 1990s, and there's been no fishing for Atlantic cod here for that long. And basically that fishery is still shut down, but there have been, in the last 10 to 12 years, there have been signs of a recovery of the fishery. And that's because the fish numbers have gone up. They haven't recovered to the point that the Canadian government is going to open up the fishery yet, but it's getting close. And we need another couple of good years for that to happen. But so far, it's been 30 years since it's been shut down, and hasn't rebounded quite enough yet to safely reopen the fishery. I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. Awesome, Bob. Well, let's wrap up today with maybe another question or two from YouTube. So first one here is, when you're pulling in the net, are there ever times it comes back empty?
Yes, definitely. And usually, this is the simple answer, usually when there's no fish there. The reason why there's no fish there is because it's too cold. Even cod, which like fish or like colder temperatures, they have a lower tolerance. We were talking about physiology before. They have a lower tolerance, and when they get when the fish are basically subjected to about 3 degrees Celsius and lower, they tend to disappear into the deep water and go into a state of reduced activity through the winter. And that's because fish are very vulnerable to ice crystals in the water. And if the ice crystals contact them, they will freeze. And they literally freeze to death. So in order to avoid that, the fish disappear and they go into deeper water where it's warmer. That sounds sort of counterintuitive, but it's actually warmer in deep water here. And that's where they ride out the winter. They do stop moving around. They move away from the shore where we're catching them, and they move into deep water, and that's when we get no fish.
All right. Well, Bob, this question tends to come up, and I love that it does, because it shows that students are thinking about problems and wondering how they can be part of the solution. So is there anything that students can do to help, protect these fish populations?
Usually the thing that we encourage is we ask them to be looking after the shorelines, telling mom and dad or grandparents or something about how important the shoreline is to people in the communities. So we do a lot of encouraging of that, and students can be very active in doing that, and increasing awareness, not dumping things into the marine environment like drinking boxes and plastics and things like that, just to keep everything nice and clean as much as we can. That will help help fish populations and nursery habitats like we have here an awful lot.
All right, excellent. Well, I want to start off with a big shout out to our classrooms today. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for all of your great questions. And then I have to turn things over to you, Bob, and your team. Thank you so much for a really great live event from the field. We love live events from the field, and the signal was just beautiful today. A great, clear connection. And, we have to get one more pan. We have to look at your office one more time, Bob. All right. Amazing. Well, a huge shout out to your team. Thank you so much for helping us out today. Again, a shout out to our classrooms. We can't wait to see you in more events, especially our ocean events coming up. And Bob, we got to do this again. Maybe in the new school year, we can find another time to head back out. Yeah, anytime. We have different fish to look at. All right. Excellent. Well, I hope everybody has an awesome rest of the week, and we'll see everyone soon. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.